So they gave me these wonderful new computers, and somehow mine's not wanting to work today. So we'll do the best I can. I apologize. I'm usually better than this, but today does not seem to be my day. All right, so hold up. Let me open up the slides because I'm not ready on this computer. Well, thank you. I said, there's not really much. I said, some days it just does not want to work. And I'm at the university, which makes it even worse because it's their technology. So that's why I come up here, because my technology does not work very well. So if I was a student, I would be up here at the university most days. All right. Sorry. All right. Class. All right, hopefully everyone can now see the slides. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Naya, I said it's one of those things, usually on university never gives me a problem. This is the first time I've ever had when I've been at the university. At home, I get problems, but at university, nah, not so much. All right, so hopefully you got an email. Explains what we're going to do this week, hopefully, as well as kind of gave you the test information of how to sign up for Examity. So please check that and make sure you're properly signed up for Examity. Make sure you run tests on your internet speed, and make sure that is working, because I can't give you an extension after the fact. The only way you'll get an extension is if it's the university's fault. If you were at the university, then I can give you an extension. So if you're in the library, I can help you out there. If you're at home, I cannot. That's just kind of the way we set things up here to make things easy. Make sure you look over the quiz questions and the practice test. That will be important when you start to study. A lot of you have now gotten into Chapter 3 quizzes, which were probably significantly harder than Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2 are kind of a little bit on the easier, and now we're getting into the more difficult material. So Chapter 3 is probably the most difficult. What I noticed a lot of you did is you switched your opportunity cost. Is pay attention to whether you're given an input table or an output table, and do the correct opportunity costs from there. So a lot of you did the input table exactly the same as you do an output table, and hence why your answers were almost always backwards. There is one question on quiz 3B where students pick the right answer, but it's on there twice. That's my fault. When I did it, I actually put the answer on there twice. So I apologize for that. I will make the adjustment today. So that is what I was going to do this afternoon after all the quizzes are in and all of that. I will go through and make the proper adjustment. So please look over your old quizzes. There's no reason not to. You should be able to click on them and it will open back up. So please look at those. All right, so let's start today. Sorry, my thing. I will try, Naya, to demonstrate the difference a little bit later after I give the lecture. I'll go through them then. You can always just redo them, Amber. It's just going to have the answer there. I would suggest you redo them anyways. And my suggestion on redoing them is just pull the top information. So just pull the table or just pull the graph and then solve for everything from there. So if you're looking at apples and oranges, just go through and find the opportunity cost and the prices all that way, and then look back on the answers from there. All right, so today we're going to cover the market forces. I'm going to turn off my camera here. So we should talk about the market forces. So we're really going to talk about supply and demand. Everywhere I've ever been, they always put supply before demand. However, in reality, we always talk about demand first, and this will be no different. So the markets have been somewhat in the news if you're paying attention, especially the stock market and prices. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about some of the factors that drive demand and supply. And we're going to look at how prices come about. Right, correct. Very quickly, you found it's GameStop is in the news. And it's really a supply and demand issue. And we'll talk about some of the demand side that we see going into this stock and what I see from kind of as an economist of what I see happening. And then on Wednesday, we'll actually start to talk about price changes. But today, we're just going to focus on supply, well, actually demand and then supply. So when we start with demand, we need to make sure that we're very, very careful with how we use the terms in this chapter. Where most students struggle in this chapter isn't with sometimes the concepts. It's using the right term for the right concept and making sure we don't confuse them. So each term has a very specific meaning. And the meaning we use in class is the one that's important. The problem is when we leave class, the media bunches all of the terms together. And because they bunch them all together, it's hard sometimes for students to separate the two. So that's what we're going to try to do today, is we're trying to make sure we set the definition correctly. So let's first talk about demand. The first term we're going to talk about demand is quantity demanded. Quantity demanded is the amount of a good that a buyer is willing and able to purchase. Okay, so for example, if you don't have $200, you can't get you any GameStop. Okay, because even though you might want to buy it, if you don't have that much money, you're not in the market for GameStop. You can't purchase it. So you have to be willing and able to purchase it. What I always like to talk about, usually for myself, is what is my quantity demanded for a yacht? Well, that answer is 0. Well, because I don't have enough money to buy a yacht. Okay, the yacht runs $10 million. Dr. Walscheid's not able to purchase it. I might be willing, but you also have to be able. So it's two important concepts there, willing and able. So once we've kind of discussed quantity demanded, the next term you want to make sure you understand is law of demand. So what the law of demand states is that if nothing else changes, all other things equal. There's a fancy Latin phrase referred to as ceteris paribus. Nothing else changes. So if nothing else is changing, when the price of a good rises, the quantity demanded of the good falls. When the price falls, the quantity demanded rises. We'll talk about that, Naya, where supply and demand meet, and they actually will always be the same. But we'll get to that on Wednesday. So keep that question there. So when you think of the law of demand, what you should write is price and quantity demanded vary inversely. That's a very important part of this. Price is related to quantity demanded. So if price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. Quantity demanded is very, very different than demand. Well, it's not hugely different, but it is different. So what we come about when we do demand is we do two things. We do a demand schedule, which if you took algebra, they used to call it an XY chart. That's all the demand schedule looks like. We put price on the left, quantity demanded on the right. and you just put the numbers in there, and it just shows you a table of it. And the demand curve is the actual graph that we draw that shows this relationship. So here's an example. On the right, we see price 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and we see the corresponding quantity demanded 24, 21, 18, 15, 12, 9, 6. So we can see those two things, and then all we do is plot them. So I go $6, $6, 6, $5, 9, $4, 12. And then all we do for the demand curve is we connect the dots. The demand curve will always be downward sloping. Doesn't matter what else we have, we will always see what's referred to as a downward sloping demand curve. For principles classes, they're always nice, pretty straight lines. Why? To make life easier. They don't have to be. Their only requirement is they are downward sloping. It means they have a negative slope. So when we increase the price, the correct terminology is when I increase the price, I decrease the quantity demanded. I do not decrease demand. I decrease quantity demanded. When you think of demand, demand is the entire chart. So what demand is it's all the prices and quantity demanded that are linked together. Demand is the whole curve, not just parts. It's the whole thing. So that way, if I have to shift, I have to shift the entire curve to change demand. And price doesn't do that. In order to shift demand, we have to change something besides the price of the good. It's one of the things outside of class they mistake, is they talk about price changes demand. No, price changes quantity demand. Demand is changed by other things. The things that affect our demand for the good or service other than the price. So there could be other things that we do or find out that causes shifts in the demand curve. So there are 5 reasons we see shifts in the demand curve. First reason, number of buyers. We'll talk about that one. That's a very, very specific term. Students want to use it all the time, but it's very, very specific. More likely, what causes a change in demand is income, price of related goods, tastes, or expectations. So when we talk about changes in demand, focus mostly on the 3 in the middle: income, price of related goods, and taste. Yes, numbers of buyers can change and expectations can change, but it's mostly the middle 3. So let's start with the first one. What can cause a change in the number of buyers? Well, if we increase the number of buyers, well, very simple, we increase demand. No, Logan, marketing cannot change the number of buyers. What changes the number of buyers has to be either a legal reason or a demographic reason. So how would I change the number of buyers through a legal reason? That would be, for example, making marijuana a legal good. That changes the number of buyers. Raising the age of alcohol to 25. That would decrease the number of buyers. Yes, people underage still buy it. But by making something illegal, is I decrease the number of buyers available for it. If you're paying attention to the news, and we talk about GameStop, which some of you did, Robinhood, by preventing people from buying goods and services, changed the demand for GameStop because they limited the number of buyers in the market. So it's not has to be done through kind of a legal or kind of demographic change. A demographic change would also be, as the country, we're getting older, and as we get older, we demand more medical care. So that's a demographic shift as we look at the composition of the area, the group, and as that changes, that can also bring in or take out number of buyers. So number of buyers is pretty simple. More buyers, increase in quantity, increase in demand. Less buyers, a decrease in demand. So here's an example of what I mean by a demand shift. When we talk about a demand shift, what that means is that at every possible price point, quantity demanded increases. So at $0, we now demand closer to 28. At $1, we demand, I don't know, 26. And we go right up the curve. So when demand increases, what we see is a shift of the curve. The price didn't have to change. We just now want more goods and services at that price than before. So a change in demand does not mean there's a change in price. A change in demand means I want more at every possible price point than before. So how we demonstrate a demand change is we shift it right. So a demand change that increases shifts right. Not up, not down, right. So demand that increases shifts right. If it were to decrease, it would shift the other way. We would just, oh, my pen doesn't work now because I'm on a different computer. I would just draw points to the left at every possible price point, and I could draw a new demand curve. Giselle, you have a question? Oh, sorry, Lo, who had a question?
How did you say that again? You said change in demand does not mean change in price. It just means what?
It just means I want more at every price.
Okay.
Right? So, right, I didn't change the price at $6. Before I wanted 6. Now at this new demand, I now want, it looks like 12. So the price didn't change. I just want more there. Giselle, did you have a question? I see your hand up. All right. Nope, sorry, that was Logan's. Never mind. We're good. All right, let me move forward. Okay. Sorry, I can hear it pop up and I couldn't tell. It was always Logan. Sorry. The next one is a change in income. There are 2 types of goods in economics: normal and inferior. Normal goods are goods where I get an increase in income. I want to buy more of that good. So if my income goes up, my demand for that good rises as well. We refer to that as a normal good. Most goods are normal goods. Most goods, as you make more money, you want to buy more of those goods. An inferior good is a good where I have more money, my demand for that good decreases. So I have more income, but my demand decreases. That shifts the demand curve left. So an example of an inferior good we typically talk about is ramen. As you graduate college, you'll probably eat less ramen noodles. Right, well, you can afford other things, we'll call it now. You don't have to necessarily be more expensive. I can afford better things or things I enjoy more. Right, so there's this difference about what I buy. As I have more money, I'm able to buy more goods and services. So usually they're more expensive, correct? They don't have to be, but usually they're more expensive. And instead of buying ramen, I might buy hamburgers. Or I might buy steak. I might buy seafood. Is that inferior does not mean anything about the quality. It's just its relationship to income. Almost all used goods are inferior goods. So I always just talk about a used BMW. Nobody probably doesn't think that's quality. However, it is an inferior good because as I make more money, I buy less used BMWs and more new BMWs. So that's what we mean when we talk about inferior. It's its relationship to income. In class or on the quiz or on the test, I'm not trying to trick you about inferior goods. They'll be obvious. Okay. Most of the time, it's just based on definition. Okay. I'm not trying to say, well, is a hamburger an inferior or normal good? We're not trying to trick you. It will always be the obvious answer. Okay. I'm not trying to trick you with any of these questions. Some of you may think that. I'm not. I'm trying to be as straightforward as I can be. But sometimes we confuse the terms so it feels tricky. Next category, not the price of the good, but the price of a related good. So there are two types of relationships in economics: substitutes and complements. Substitutes are goods we buy in place of one another. Complements are goods that we buy with one another. So let's take the example from the slides. The example is pizza and hamburgers. So, Michael, the slides will be, it's recorded, so you may look at the video when you're done. Pizza and hamburgers. So kind of the example of substitutes. So if the price of a pizza goes up, here's the trick question. Well, it's not tricky, but it's where students mess up. If the price of pizza increases, what happens to the demand for pizza? The answer should be nothing. If the price of pizza increases, quantity demanded of pizza decreases. The demand does not change. If I increase or decrease the price of the good, the demand for that good does not change. However, the demand for a different good or a related good will change. So here we talk about increasing the price of pizza does change my demand for hamburgers. So as the price of pizza rises, the quantity demanded of pizza falls. So I buy less pizza. Demand hasn't changed. I just buy less pizza. I buy less quantity. And because pizza has become more expensive, what I do is I change it to goods that haven't changed in price. Or we talk about they are relatively cheaper. Their price hasn't changed. The price of hamburgers didn't change. However, because the price of pizza goes up, that's exactly right, Francisco. The price of pizza causes a movement along the pizza demand curve rather than a shift, correct? However, the pizza price will shift the hamburger curve because I didn't change the price of hamburgers. I just now will buy more at every possible price. So those are goods that we would call substitutes. I asked students in class, if this was in class, we'd go across the room and I'd ask you to give me examples of substitutes. Almost everyone can think of these: Coke and Pepsi, laptops and tablets, movie streaming and movie theaters. All of those are things that we would consider to be substitutes, goods that I buy in place of one another. The second part of this are complements. These are goods that we buy together. So here, an increase in the price of the good leads to a decrease in the demand for its complements. So for example, if the price of smartphones rises, the quantity demand of smartphones falls. People buy fewer smartphones. The quantity demanded of smartphones change. And because I haven't bought as many smartphones, my demand for the apps decreases as well. The price of the apps didn't change, just my demand did. So I just buy less apps at each given price point. Examples of complements are tuition and textbooks, bagels and cream cheese, milk and cookies, peanut butter and jelly. Probably my favorite example is, it was an example, it wasn't mine, I take no credit for it, but it's an example of when I asked students to give me examples of goods that are complements. So we would go through, and I asked a student one time, I asked him, so what's a complement for diapers? So if you were going to the grocery store, what would you find right next to the diaper aisle? Now this student, without blinking an eye, I don't remember if it was a he or she, gave me the answer of beer. They said that beer and diapers were complements. They said every time they went to the store and they went down the diaper aisle, the beer was located in really close proximity to the diaper aisle. Now, I don't know how many of you shop at the Zero at Walmart, but when you do, go and try to see where the diaper aisle is in relation to the beer aisle. You'll find they're surprisingly close. And when the student gave me this, we were not in Fort Smith. We were in a different city with a different grocery store, but had the same layout. So what grocery stores care a lot about is they spend a lot of time hiring economists to look for things. What goods are complements? What goods are substitutes? And how do I organize my store to take advantage of these relationships? Because when someone comes to my store, I want them to buy all the goods that they wanted to buy. I don't want to try to trick them, but if they want to come to my store and buy diapers and beer, I want to make sure I make that accessible to them. I don't want someone to come to my store, buy diapers, and then go to the convenience store to buy beer. I don't want them to come to my store and buy bagels and then go to the convenience store to buy cream cheese. I want them to buy what they're going to buy in my store. So what I do is I make sure I set my store up accordingly so they don't forget goods. So if you go down and buy Fritos, you will always find bean dip right next to the Fritos because the store doesn't want you to forget it. Okay, they're not trying to trick you. They're just trying to help you along there. Is when you see Fritos and bean dip, they want you to buy them both from their store, not from a different store. So they want to make sure they set up their store accordingly. Some of you have probably noticed that on websites as well. I don't know how many of you shop Amazon, but when you're looking at a product, what do you notice underneath the product you're looking to buy? Correct. You want to make sure things go where they go. So think about Amazon. How many of you buy stuff from Amazon? What does it have always right underneath Amazon? Underneath the product you look at? It has people also bought these products together. Or people also looked at these items together, related searches. In fact, Naya, they're either complements or substitutes. I'll help you what related they are. They want goods that people bought together or goods that people bought in place of one another. So Amazon's like a giant grocery store. And they do take advantage of all that information to make sure you buy their goods from them. Don't forget to buy, I don't even know what they sometimes have together. If you're buying peanut butter, I'm sure jelly will be on there as well. So they try to make sure they take advantage of these complements and substitutes. You'll see them all the time. All right, so Logan, when you talked about number of buyers and you talked about marketing, marketing doesn't really affect number of buyers. What marketing does is it affects taste. And this is what you see happening with GameStop right now. What's happening with GameStop and why we've seen this change in demand is we've seen a change in taste. So when we talk about taste, that is how I view the good or how I view the service. If you can change my view positively, then demand will increase. If you change my good negatively, demand will decrease. So what we see happening is all of a sudden people want to buy more GameStop. Well, why do they want to buy more GameStop? Well, it could be for financial reasons. They like the company. Or it could be for other reasons. They want to stick it to hedge funds. They want to join a revolution. They might have some intrinsic value of buying GameStop that may or may not be based on fundamentals. As economists, we don't care. I don't care why you want to buy GameStop. I just want to talk about what happens when more people change their view of it. Well, what happens then is we see an increase in demand. So more people are wanting to buy it at every given price point. So what we see is an increase in the demand for GameStop. Or at least we did last week. I haven't seen what it's doing right now. And what that changes, sometimes with gas, gas doesn't usually, our change in taste of gas doesn't usually change overnight, but sometimes it does. As sometimes we think about, well, I don't want to, whether this, again, I'm just giving examples. I don't want to buy a car that pollutes anymore. So I don't want to buy any more gas. So I think gas is a pollutant. So I change my taste towards how I view gasoline. And because I believe gasoline is destroying the earth, I'm going to go buy an electric car. I changed what I thought about gasoline. And when I change my taste, it's going to cause supply and demand to change. This is what advertisers do. They send out messaging about their product to try to change how I view it, either positively or maybe a competitor they want me to view negatively. As economists, we don't try to explain why you think what you think. That's somebody else's job in this world. Our job is you changed your view. How will that affect the market? Now, I can't remember. Yes, it'd have to be a lot of people to change. If I change, I'm relatively small and insignificant in this world because I really can't change the market. It has to usually be quite a few people that change. But a lot of people will. Like if I decide all of a sudden to buy GameStop, it's not going to change the price. If the entire class decides to buy GameStop, well, that might change the price some. If I got the entire university to buy GameStop, because we all thought it was this new great invention, that would change. So sometimes I can change one person's view doesn't help so much. That's why it has to usually be done through marketing, through television, radio, newspaper, social media. That changes how we view a good, and it changes our demand for that good. That's why a lot of people try boycotts. If I boycott it, it doesn't matter. But if I get all my friends and I get all my internet friends to boycott it, we can change demand significantly. That can have an influence. So we try to do a lot of marketing, and it's starting to become more popular, especially in areas such as social media, and how that's going to influence our behavior or how we look at a good. Again, as economists, we don't care why you end up there. We just care what happens. Now, as a person, I care why you end up there, but as an economist, we don't. That's a psychology, that's sociology's responsibility to explain that. As the economist, we say, here's how you changed your view, here's what happens in the market. The next one is, what about expectations? As we expect the future to change, as I change my expectations of how the future will behave. So an example of this, it's not true, but an example of this is if all of a sudden today you found out there was a hurricane that was going to hit the Gulf. So what happens? Well, I know when a hurricane hits the Gulf, that causes gasoline prices to rise. And because I know that causes gasoline prices to rise, what I do then is I go fill up my tank today. Did the price of gasoline change today? No, but my demand did because I expected prices in the future to change. And because I expected something different in the future, I changed my expectations. It will cause a change in demand. So let's kind of finish up this discussion of demand. A change in demand. So when we talk about a change in demand, what I am really referring to is a shift on the demand curve. And I get a shift on the demand curve when I change something besides price. And the 5 things that we can change are income, number of buyers, taste, expectations of the future, and price of related goods. So if one of those 5 things changes, then it'll be a change in demand. If it is a change in price, it will only be a change in quantity demanded, as we just move along the line. So I left here a table. If you look in my notes for these slides, I've left a lot more information in the slides than I have sometimes in the before, just because this information or these slides are a lot more bulky and a lot more important to make sure we understand than the other slides. So always look through the notes. I try to help you out as best I can. So there are things, if you look on the PowerPoint slides at the very bottom, you can go through and look at the notes. So let's do a couple of quick questions here, and let's go through this. So what I want you to do on your scratch papers, draw the demand curve for D1 and put a point on there, any point you want. Just call it point A. Okay, and remember, this is the demand curve for orange juice. So think about the following scenarios and then kind of draw what you think will happen in the curve. So what do you think will happen when the price of apple juice increases? What happens to the demand for orange juice? What happens on the demand curve when the price of orange juice falls? And finally, what happens on the demand curve when consumer income falls? So here's what your graph should look like, hopefully. And as Nadia quickly points out, if orange juice and apple are substitutes, what we should expect to happen is an increase in demand. Demand shifts right. So that's what you should hopefully show. Part B, price of orange juice falls. You should just have a new point on the demand curve. And finally, question C, what happens when consumer incomes fall? Orange juice is a normal good, so if incomes fall, then demand for orange juice will decrease, and we shift it left. All right, are there any questions about demand? All right, if there are no questions about demand, then we are through for today. What I will do now is I will try to bring up some of those quiz questions and try to show you the difference between an input table and an output table. So let me open that up really quickly here. I'm still not, okay, I'm not presenting. All right, so I'm going to pull open those slides. We are in quiz. All right. So hold on. All right, can everyone see the quiz now? Okay, good. All right, let me try to make it a little bigger if I can. All right, so let's kind of talk about, so let's start here on table 3-4. So reading table 3-4, it says assume that Andrea and Paul each has 480 minutes available. Okay, if each person divides his time equally between the production of wheat and beef, then the total production is, okay, so that means I would spend 240. But the information that I gave you, so the table, if you read the table, what it says, hopefully you can see this, is minutes needed to make one. If you see that, that tells you that is an input table. This is the inputs I need to make the good. So for example, here, this is what we refer to as the input. So I need X number of minutes to make 1 bushel of wheat. I need X number of minutes to make 1 pound of beef. That is the input table, which is different than the output table. So if you look here at table 323 or table 323, it has both an input and an output table. So here, it tells you the labor hours needed to make 1 pound of pork and tomatoes. That's the input table. The output table is pounds produced in 24 hours. So to solve the opportunity cost for question 12, so for the farmer, what I would do is I would do 4 pork equals 8 tomatoes. Divide by 4, get 1 pork equals so that's how I would solve for the question 12. However, if you did using the input table, is you would have gone 6 pork equals 3 tomatoes divided by 6, and you got 1 pork equals 1/2 tomatoes. You would have come up with, oh sorry, you'd have come up with the wrong way to do that. So a lot of times what I saw students did is you use the input tables to solve it rather than the output part. It's one of those things I say in the slides, until you actually work them, you don't pick up on the difference. And that's why we have kind of low stake quizzes, is we have quizzes that don't count for a whole lot. Now you may think they do, but in reality they don't. A quiz counts for 10 points overall. Remember, each test is worth 200 points. The quizzes are here to check you. Am I going the right way? Am I in the right direction? Or do I need some help? I will look through your quiz notes today That's on my list of things to do when I get my computer to actually work. And I will go through your quiz notes and make feedback suggestions on what I saw you did wrong if you submitted them for 3B and 3C. Is I can go through and I can see how you worked questions to see if you were working them the right way or the wrong way. It's okay to mess things up. It's probably some of the most missed questions in test 1 is they get chapter 3 backwards. I don't know why. And some students, they do it right on every quiz, and then all of a sudden in the test, they make it backwards. So please spend some time, work these practice problems. Amber, one of the ways you talked about, well, how can I kind of redo the quiz again? That's okay, Amber. I said that's part of what I'm trying to correct. Yes, I said most of you did them over the slides. You can do them over the slides, but just the notes there are a little more specific. I want you to go in depth about certain questions. They're actually a little more tied to the quiz questions. I'll give you credit right now for the first module as students are trying to get a feel for this. I'll still give you your credit, so don't worry about that. I'll just make a comment on your feedback about what you need to do better, just so you remember in the future. Some of you haven't turned in quiz notes yet. You did well in the first chapters, so you didn't need to, and that's okay. That's why I have those quiz notes options, is to prevent you from, if you do the work, I want to help you get through this as best I can. Again, just because you do the work and you didn't learn anything, I can't help you then. But if you do the work and you learn it as best you can, and you're trying to learn and trying to get through, I'm trying to help you get to the end. So that's what those quiz notes there. They're kind of there for a buffer to make sure, ooh, I tried that quiz and somehow I mixed everything up. And when you mix it up, I should see it in the quiz notes and we work the practice problems. So remember, for each quiz, there are notes about that quiz. What's going to be on that quiz, the type of questions I'm going to ask, the material I'm going to ask. So for example, when you're looking at the quizzes for chapter 4, like the first one deals with demand. The second one kind of deals with supply and equilibrium. And then the third one deals with changes in equilibrium. So it goes about giving the exact kind of material I'm going to look for in that quiz question or in those quiz notes. So you kind of have an idea about what the quiz is about. All right, are there any other questions?